Washington County, Pennsylvania, Wednesday, May 18, 1977, 10:10 p.m. 18-year-old Brenda Lee Ritter leaves the home of her boyfriend in South Strabane Township. 3 unsolved homicides over the previous 7 months have left many nerves on edge, and Brenda's boyfriend makes certain that she locks the doors to her car before departing. At some point over the next 2 hours, something went badly wrong. By the following afternoon, Brenda's fate would be known, and the number of unsolved homicides in Washington County had risen by 1. Initially, authorities felt that Brenda Ritter's death might provide the break they had been looking for. Her disappearance had been noted quickly, the time frame was well established, and both her body and vehicle were discovered within 15 hours. Unfortunately, the investigation into Brenda Ritter's death would soon fall right in line with the others, past and future. 42 years later, her case, along with many of the others from that tragic time period, remains cold. To this day, authorities are not certain if they are looking at 5 or more unrelated incidents, or if the so-called Washington Strangler was more than just a fancy moniker. Washington County, Pennsylvania is situated in the extreme southwestern portion of the state, bordered on the north by Allegheny County and Pittsburgh, and Ohio County, West Virginia to the west. It is a mostly rural and suburban locale along the southern edge of the once mighty Steel Belt. Farmers and blue-collar workers comprise the majority of the populace. Interstate 79 and 70 bisect the county, providing an easy ingress and egress essential for growth and expansion. Washington County resident Brenda Lee Ritter graduated from Canon McMillan High School in 1976. Shortly thereafter, she went to work as a secretary at the Carter Kennedy Construction Company, a Washington-based home building and remodeling firm. Not much has been made public about Brenda Ritter's last day. On May 18, 1977, Brenda, her mother Hazel, and her boyfriend, Larry Bonazza, went together to look at a vehicle which Brenda was thinking of buying. Brenda and Larry next went to Larry's home along McLean Farm Road, now the North Main Street extension, where they spent much of the day relaxing and watching television before going out for dinner to the Hobo Shack behind the Washington Mall. Later that evening, severe thunderstorms were forecast for the Washington County area. Around 10 p.m., Brenda apparently decided it was time to head home. Hoping to beat the weather, Brenda drove Larry back to his home and advised him that she had no intentions of meeting anyone else, but was going to drive straight to her home on Linwood Drive, about 3 miles away. The 3 unsolved homicides from the previous 7 months were not far from her mind, and both Larry Bonazza as well as his mother made certain that Brenda locked all of the doors to her vehicle before driving away. Brenda left the Bonazza home. Not long thereafter, the skies blazed with lightning, and soon the rain was coming down in sheets. According to Brenda's parents, she could always be relied upon to call if she was going to be late or if there had been a sudden change in plans. However, this time, given the severity of the storm, they both assumed that the telephone lines had simply been knocked out and that Brenda had opted instead to spend the night at Larry's home. Around 7 a.m. the following morning, Brenda's mother called the Bonazzas' home and was horrified to learn that Brenda had indeed left at approximately 10:10 the previous night. Immediately sensing that something was terribly wrong, Brenda's mother called the North Strabane Township Police. A description of Brenda and her vehicle were broadcast to all law enforcement agencies in the area, and preparations for a search got underway. At around 11 a.m., a local resident contacted authorities to report an apparently abandoned vehicle parked along Rankin Rd, very near to the intersection with Zediker Station Rd and the South Strabane Maintenance Shed. The vehicle's description, a gold, early 1970s Ford Pinto, matched Brenda's vehicle to a T. Authorities from North and South Strabane, as well as representatives of the Pennsylvania State Police, responded to the location. The car was quickly identified as Brenda's. The driver's door was unlocked and its window rolled halfway down, unusual given the heavy thunderstorms the previous night. The keys were inside, along with her purse, which was found toppled over on the passenger seat with some of its contents spilt out. Later, it was determined that Brenda's driver's license and possibly her wallet were missing. The car was secured and dusted for prints, yet contemporary accounts indicate that nothing of investigative value was found. Attention now turned even stronger to locating Brenda herself. Police contacted local volunteer firemen to initiate a search of the area. Sadly, their assistance would not be needed. Before any search party could be organized, word reached them that a state police helicopter had already spotted Brenda's body on a hillside about a mile to the east. Following directions relayed by the state police helicopter, authorities proceeded to an area along Roop Road, just past the intersection with Rankin Rd. About 100 yards away, through a field of grass and in an area of scrubwood, authorities located the body of Brenda Ritter. Aside from her socks and shoes, Brenda was found in a state of complete undress. About 50 to 75 feet away, in a small clearing, authorities found the blue denim jeans and blouse that Brenda had been wearing the night before. The jeans had been ripped. The cause of Brenda's demise was obvious from the outset. She had been garroted with her undergarments, wrapped around her neck and twisted tightly with a stick. The makeshift garrote had been wrapped so tightly around Brenda's neck that it had cut into the skin along the right-hand side. Backtracking to Roop Road, authorities were able to trace a recently trod path through the growth. Police were also able to discern faint footprints in the damp ground. Brenda's car, a gold 1973 Ford Pinto, was found approximately here, near the intersection of Rankin and Zediker Station Roads, just north of Interstate 70. Brenda was found in this general area, about 1 mile to the east. Oddly, both locations are well off the route Brenda would normally have taken from Larry Bonazza's home to her own home. At the time, Larry Bonazza lived at 186 McLean Farm Road, approximately here. South Strabane Chief of Police Donald Zofchak convened a late afternoon press conference where he laid out for reporters the route that Brenda would have taken under normal circumstances. According to Chief Zofchak, Brenda would normally have taken McLean Farm Road to Country Club Road into Meadowlands. From there, Brenda would have driven north to Racetrack Road, turned left onto U.S. Route 19, and driven to the former location of the Brown Derby restaurant. Brenda would then turn right off of U.S. Route 19 and drive first to Christie Road before finally turning right onto Linwood Road. Chief Zofchak hypothesized that Brenda had been waylaid at some point along this route and diverted by force to an alternate path. However, Zofchak also stated that the exact route Brenda had taken was not known. Larry Bonazza has advised that Brenda often would take another, more southerly route, which utilized Manifold Drive. Several witnesses came forward and reported that they had observed Brenda's car parked at the location where it was found as early as midnight. An autopsy later pinpointed the time of Brenda's death as between 11:30 and midnight, based upon her stomach contents. Other witnesses stated that they had observed a man hitchhiking along I-70 during the early morning of May 19th. A rough sketch of this unidentified male was created and made public, but no further leads were developed. Washington County Coroner Farrell Jackson, recalling the 3 previous unsolved homicides, made no attempt to hide his disgust at the events when he stated, quote, "We have a maniac running around here. I'd like to get the things the killer used on each of those girls and strangle him with them. You can print that." End quote. Jackson was far from alone in his anger, and the region, already on edge, was soon gripped with fear. Sales of firearms rose. Nighttime activity significantly decreased. Spouses and boyfriends grew more and more protective, and residents even made inquiries about purchasing canisters of tear gas. The local citizenry was soon calling on District Attorney Jesse Costa to seek help from the FBI. His refusal to do so prompted a series of protests outside the old Troop B State Police Barracks. Police seemed baffled. Amidst the fear and anger, rumors naturally began to fly. Chief among them, speculation that all 4 deaths were the work of one person, a son of Sam in southwestern Pennsylvania. At one point, the Observer reporter coined the phrase Washington Strangler, and the moniker stuck. Authorities, however, were divided in their opinions and investigated Brenda Ritter's death as an isolated incident.
No, absolutely nothing. And as theory is really linking the 4, and not through theory of the investigators themselves. And when I add that, we haven't said, we're not ruling it out, but we just wouldn't say, just like you, we wouldn't state that they're directly linked, or they're not. We don't know. There's nothing to show us that they are.
There's no concrete evidence, nothing laying around.
There's just a very, the 3 were strangled out of the 4. All were sexually assaulted. But the similarities from there on is you just don't have it.
But Rendar says that the case is far from being at a standstill. The investigation, he says, has taken on direction. The number of men working on the case has been increased to 25, and there are new leads coming in every day from citizens. For Newsfront, I'm Andrea Weisgerber.
Chief Sofchak addressed this issue in an interview with station WTRF on May 20th.
As far as the connection so far, no. The similarities, I have to admit, are the strangulations part of it. We have no concrete evidence which ties in the 4 or 5 which have taken place in this county, in the surrounding area. It could go either way at this point. We were talking earlier, I'm not convinced in either way right now. We hope evidence in the next day or so, or maybe the next few hours, would change that, give us some lead us to a specific person. That's not forthcoming at this present time, and I can't give you anything more other than the details of that. I know the officers are out beating the brush right now, and maybe by 4 or so we'll have some more. I know it seems to be progressing. We have leads, not established yet, but we're not at a dead end either, and that's good. I feel things are progressing pretty well.
Sofchak and other police officials say that there's no need to panic, but the concern is evident among some Washington County residents. It's been reported applications for gun permits have increased, and parents are walking their children to and from bus stops. But Sofchak and the other police officers say they're optimistic that the beefed-up investigation will net results. For Newsfront, I'm Andrea Weisgerber.
On Saturday, May 21st, authorities seemed to have gotten their first break. That day, along Route 136 near Linwood Drive, a resident found a gold ID bracelet alongside the roadway. This discovery was made approximately 1 mile north of the location where Brenda's body had been found.
Is it a man's bracelet or a woman's?
Yes, it's a man's bracelet. It's a Spidell bracelet, and it has the name of Jack on it. We've taken this bracelet to the jewelers in the Washington area. They were unable to identify the printing. They say the unusual thing about it, that there's both upper and lowercase letters used on the engraving, and most of the engraving done in this area is all uppercase.
Lupino later stated that evidence was recovered, however, he declined to elaborate.
I could say that they found some evidence on it, but were reluctant to release that information at this time, as the bracelet may be used in court.
Attempts to trace the bracelet to a person or jeweler were unsuccessful. In the midst of the investigation into Brenda Ritter's murder, Washington County was abruptly shaken by yet another tragedy. On the morning of Tuesday, May 24th, 61-year-old Sheriff Hannah Pye Johns was found dead at his home on Samaria Avenue. Johns, who had recently lost in an attempt to win re-election as the Democratic candidate for sheriff, had died by his own hand, having shot himself in the chest with a .357 Magnum. Johns had been appointed sheriff of Washington County in mid-March after Sheriff Alex DeBrazzini took a job with the State Auditor General's office. Following John's suicide, fear continued to mount, and, as if things were not already bad enough, they were soon exacerbated by yet another slaying, a slaying with which MysteriousWV is quite familiar. On June 13, 1977, 26-year-old Roberta Elam, known to most as Sister Robin, was found strangled to death on the grounds of a convent just outside of Wheeling, West Virginia. The similarities in age, sex, and modus operandi immediately led many to theorize that the so-called Washington Strangler had struck again.
A connection between the Sister Roberta Elam rape murder and 4 similar cases since last November in Washington County, Pennsylvania, still has not been ruled out. And authorities say they are depending on the public conscience to help them out in this investigation.
Representatives of Washington County and the Pennsylvania State Police came to Wheeling to compare notes with the Ohio County, West Virginia Sheriff's Department. While there were obvious similarities, a number of key inconsistencies were also noted. Chief among them, it appeared that Sister Robin had been strangled by someone using their bare hands, whereas in Washington County, an article of clothing or other garrote had been used. Also, it appeared that Sister Robin had been stalked and that her death was, in some way, premeditated. The events in Washington County were widely felt to have been crimes of opportunity. In the end, it was determined that the murders, in all likelihood, were not linked, yet the possibility was never entirely discarded. In fact, authorities at the time noted that there seemed to be more similarities between Ritter's murder and another homicide which had occurred just under 6 months previous and only about 10 minutes away. On Wednesday, November 24, 1976, 21-year-old Susan Elizabeth Rush was working at the G.C. Murphy's store in the Washington Mall, about 2 miles west of the location where Ritter's body was found. Susan finished her shift, did some shopping, and was later observed leaving the mall at approximately 6:10 p.m. She was due to meet her family at the West Washington United Methodist Church at 7:30 p.m. for Thanksgiving services. She never arrived. Around midnight, her family contacted the authorities. At around 9 a.m. the following morning, Susan's brother Gary located her vehicle, a white and green Plymouth Valiant, parked along North Avenue about a half-mile south of the Washington Mall. The car was locked, but Gary was able to observe underwear and a brassiere in the front seat. Later, after obtaining a key to the vehicle, Gary opened the car's trunk and discovered Susan's lifeless body inside. According to the Washington Police Department, Susan's body appeared to have been hastily clad, but they could not say with certainty if a sexual assault had occurred. Her pants had been torn, and her sweater was found turned inside out. Markings on Susan's neck indicated that the cause of death was strangulation. No ligature or garrote was found at the scene, but police theorized the implement may have been a shoelace from Susan's shoe, one of which was found to be missing its laces. Later, an autopsy determined that Susan had been raped. Additionally, it was found that her larynx had been crushed in the assault. Though they have never elaborated, authorities at the time stated that they felt Susan had been assaulted and murdered elsewhere, and her car and body later deposited on North Avenue. The murder was estimated to have taken place at approximately midnight. No suspects were ever publicly named in Susan's murder. Curiously, both Susan Rush and Brenda Ritter each shared a connection to the G.C. Murphy store in the now-defunct Washington Mall. Both Susan and Brenda's sister Denise each worked there during the fall of 1976. Whether or not they knew one another outside of the workplace is not known. Equally curious, Brenda obtained her 1973 Ford Pinto, the car she was driving on the night she was murdered, from the same sister, Denise. Depending on the source, between 5 and 7 murders were, at one time, thought to have possibly been linked to the work of the so-called Washington Strangler. Each individual case seemed to have its own set of both similarities and differences when compared to the others. As early as the Susan Rush murder, authorities were already considering that they may be looking at a repeat offender. When news of Rush's murder first appeared in the printed press, speculation about a possible connection with an earlier killing was already being expressed. 5 days before Susan Rush was killed, 30-year-old Barbara Lewis of Penn Hills in nearby Allegheny County was strangled and her body dumped into a trash bin behind the Black Ridge Civic Association on Beulah Road in Churchill Borough. Her hands had been bound behind her back with a wool belt and one of her stockings. When found, Lewis was wearing only a bra, black slacks, and black flat-type shoes. Paper gauze had been packed tightly into both her mouth and her nose. However, Lewis had not been sexually assaulted. Between the November 1976 murder of Susan Rush and the June 1977 murder of Sister Roberta Elam, 2 other rape homicides made headlines in the region. On February 13, 1977, 16-year-old Mary Irene Jency, a sophomore at Charleroi Area High School, left her home to meet up with some friends at a Charleroi dairy store. The time was approximately 6 p.m. At around 8:15 p.m., her purse was found alongside the road near the Fallowfield Township Fire Department. She did not return home and was reported missing the following day. 6 days later, her nude body was found in a remote wooded area of Fallowfield Township near the North Charleroi Sportsman Club. She had been savagely beaten about the head as well as sexually assaulted. Police later found her blue jeans and a shirt a short distance away from her body. An autopsy later revealed that Jency had been killed within 3 hours of leaving her home, although the extremely cold temperatures at the time made determining an exact time of death virtually impossible. However, one fact that was not revealed in 1977 was that Mary Jency was 6 weeks pregnant at the time she was murdered. 2 months later, Jency's former boyfriend, David Bernard DeVoley, was arrested for her rape and murder, but soon released due to insufficient evidence. Nearly 33 years later, in May of 2010, both DeVoley and another man, Robert Irwin, were arrested for Jency's murder. Irwin had been Jency's boyfriend at the time of her murder and the father of her unborn child. DeVoley eventually pleaded guilty to hindering prosecution and tampering with physical evidence. Robert Irwin was later found guilty of third-degree murder in a non-jury trial, although serious doubt was later cast on the verdict when the presiding judge, Paul Pizanski, was found guilty of stealing cocaine from evidence at the time of his ruling. DeVoley served a short prison sentence and was released in 2012. On September 11, 2019, Robert Irwin's latest appeal for a new trial was denied. 1 month after Mary Gency was found murdered, on March 17, 1977, 17-year-old Debbie Capiola, also from Allegheny County, vanished after leaving her home to catch the bus for school. 10 days later, she too was found raped and murdered just over the Washington County line in an abandoned strip mine. Debbie Capiola's case also would not remain moribund. 23 years later, on December 14, 2000, 45-year-old airplane mechanic David Robert Kennedy was arrested when fluids found on Debbie Capiola's jeans were genetically matched to him. Although it would take another 5 years, Kennedy was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison on November 23, 2005. Unlike DeVoley and Irwin, questions immediately arose concerning Kennedy's possible involvement in the other rapes and murders in 1976 and 1977. Corporal Beverly Ashton with the State Police Cold Case Squad made a public reply. Quote, "There is nothing Kennedy is currently considered a suspect in, but that doesn't mean we aren't still looking." End quote. Kennedy's attorney, William Manifesto, was more blunt. Quote, "Any suggestion that Kennedy was involved in any of those other cases would be inappropriate and incorrect. There was a series of investigations done a few years ago, as I recall, and there was absolutely no basis to suggest that he was involved at all." End quote. Today, Kennedy continues to serve his sentence. To this day, many have their doubts as well as their suspicions. At the time, however, the one overriding emotion was fear. Fear that a serial killer was stalking southwestern Pennsylvania and northern West Virginia. Authorities continue to maintain that no firm connection has ever been established between any of the rape and murder cases from 1976 and 1977, and they now cite the convictions of Kennedy and Irwin as strong evidence of support. It is also curious to note that despite the atmosphere of tension and fear, the murder rate in southwestern Pennsylvania during 1977 was actually down, and the number of murders cleared or solved during the same time was up to 84%, 2% above the national average. According to a December 15, 1977 article in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the number of homicides in Allegheny County was down from 94 in 1976 and 112 in 1974 to only 72 in 1977. The article went on to report that at the time of publication, there were 41 unsolved homicides in western Pennsylvania. The only real difference noted was that slightly more murders seemed to be occurring in the suburbs and rural areas as opposed to cities like Pittsburgh. A link to this edition of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is available in this video's description. One thing to keep in mind is this. If we are not looking at a serial killer, but rather separate, isolated incidents, then that is certainly no cause for either joy or a declaration of victory. What it really means is that not one, but as many as 4 or 5 separate killers may still be on the loose. True, it would be pleasant and reassuring to think that capturing and convicting just one person would forever lay these matters to rest. Sadly, that seems less and less likely, and to engage in that line of thinking would be contrary to basic law enforcement protocol. Brenda Lee Ritter was laid to rest in the small country cemetery of the Emmanuel United Presbyterian Church on Sunday, May 22, 1977. At the request of her family, reporters remained outside during the funeral services. Said one tear-stricken relative, quote, "Please, leave us alone. It will only give the rotten, expletive deleted, something else to gloat about," end quote. Today, Brenda's mother Hazel still lives in the family home along Linwood Drive. In 1977, authorities stated that they had suspects in the murders of Brenda Ritter and Susan Rush, but no names were ever mentioned. David Kennedy, David Davioli, and Robert Irwin were already on their radar for the crimes they were later convicted of, but it is not known if these were the only suspects to whom law enforcement was referring. Today, the murders of Brenda Ritter, Susan Rush, Barbara Lewis, and Roberta Elam remain on the books, and the convictions of Kennedy and Irwin have helped to ensure that they remain in the public light. And while there is no certainty that these tragedies are connected by anything other than timing and fear, it is just possible that unraveling one may loosen the threads on the others.
Brenda Lee Ritter was last seen alive at approximately 10:10 p.m. on May 18, 1977, when she left the home of her boyfriend, Larry Bonazza, at what was then 186 McLean Farm Road in South Strabane Township, Washington County, Pennsylvania. At the time, Brenda was driving a gold 1973 Ford Pinto, Pennsylvania license number U56308. As Brenda was leaving the Bonazza home, a severe thunderstorm was fast approaching the area. Brenda's parents reported her missing at 7:15 the following morning. At around 11 a.m., Brenda's car was found parked along Rankin Rd near the intersection with Zediker Station Rd and the South Strabane Township maintenance shed. The driver's side door was unlocked and the window half down. Brenda's purse and keys were found inside. The location where the car was found was not along the route Brenda would have normally taken from the Bonazza home to her own home at 196 Linwood Drive, roughly 2 miles away. A short time later, a police helicopter spotted Brenda's body about 100 yards off Roop Road in a scrub brush area, about 3/4 of a mile east of the location where her car was found. Brenda was found clad only in her socks and shoes. The rest of her clothing was found about 50 feet away in a small clearing. Her blue denim jeans had been ripped. Police were able to discern a path through the high grass, indicating that Brenda had either been carried or walked from the side of the road. Shoe prints were found, but no further information about size or type is available. An autopsy later revealed that Brenda had been sexually assaulted prior to her death, and that she had likely been killed between 11:30 p.m. on May 18th and midnight on May 19th. This determination was made by an examination of undigested food in Brenda's stomach. Also, witnesses reported seeing Brenda's car parked along Rankin Road where it was later found as early as midnight. If you have any information on the rape and murder of Brenda Lee Ritter, please contact Troop B of the Pennsylvania State Police at 724-223-5200.